Good evening, everyone. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice on 790 KABC. I am a veteran advocate and an attorney at the Veterans Law Group. We have exclusively represented veterans pursuing their VA disability claims for over 25 years. But what this show is about highlighting and celebrating veterans and their families, looking at organizations that are providing very unique support for veterans, just talking about news in general, and then also answering your questions on how veterans can get support with dealing with the VA. If you'd like to reach out to us off air to talk about your claim, I know sometimes people don't like to talk about their claim on air, you can reach us at veteranslaw.com. But we are live this evening, so if you have questions related to veterans claims or would just like to talk about things that are affecting veterans right now, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment that are affecting veterans, feel free to reach out and give us a call. You can reach us live here at 800-222-KABC. That's 800-222-5222. And as far as focusing on veterans and kind of highlighting, I love to tell people stories. And tonight we're being joined by Austin. He is a U.S. Navy veteran, and we're going to talk a little bit about his story. And again, if you've got questions or just want to chime in and talk about all things related to military and veterans, call us at 800-222-5222. Welcome, Austin.
Hey, Amanda. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
I'm glad that you could join us this evening. I really appreciate it. Generally, what I like to do before getting into anything like current events or that kind of thing is just kind of establish a little bit of what your background is. All I know, well, I know more than that, but all the audience knows at this point is you're a U.S. Navy veteran. I'd love to hear a little bit about why you decided to join the military, what was interesting to you about it, or what kind of motivated you to do that.
Absolutely. So I made the decision to pursue joining the military while I was wrapping up college, trying to figure out, what does this next phase of my life look like? And a little bit before that, about 50% of the guys in my family historically have served. So I didn't feel pressure that I needed to, but I definitely felt like, this is a part of my personal history with my family. And I did decide to go that route because I knew I didn't want to look back 10 years later and say, now I'm too old to even join. Am I going to regret this? And I think looking back, if I didn't join and choose to serve, I probably would have regretted it. So I'm glad I did. I think I would have made that same decision again.
And what years did you serve? When did you join?
So I joined in 2012. And got out in September of 2019. So right before all the interesting stuff happened.
And I'm curious, with the family history, the rest of your family, did they join the Navy and you pursued the Navy for that reason, or did they serve in other branches of service?
We have a little bit of everything. I would say Navy's not the norm. My grandfather was Army Corps of Engineers, and my other grandfather was Air Force. And then we got some Army kids sprinkled in with uncles. The only Navy veteran that I actually know of is my great-grandfather, and he started off and ended up actually transferring to the Coast Guard, where he became a chief with the Coast Guard. So,
what attracted you to the Navy?
So, coming out of high school, I was kind of tired of the athletics scene, and I had been on a state championship team there, and that was a push, and I loved it, but I was tired going into college. At the end of college, I was ready for that team high achieving atmosphere again. So I actually looked at every single branch and said, okay, what are the special operations programs for each of the different branches? Figured out, Navy has some pretty good locations and a little bit better lifestyle. And my intention was never to do the 20 years. So just based on my situation and what I wanted to do, I pursued the Navy path. And I actually started off going to the physical fitness sessions with the Navy recruiters as a diver.
Wow.
And Senior Chief Getka, shout out to you if you listen to this by some chance, he gave me kind of a rundown on the different options. And he said, like, based on what you're telling me, EOD is really going to be a better choice for you. And at that point, I did switch over, even though the idea of getting blown up was a little bit scary to me.
Now, I'm going to stop you for a second, because not all of our listeners in Los Angeles are veterans. So when you use acronyms, people are going to be like, what? So help explain with that. EOD.
Yeah, EOD is Explosive Ordnance Disposal.
Okay.
And our job really was to make sure that any explosive threat was removed so that whoever we were working with could safely proceed with their mission. And we worked with everybody. Mm-hmm. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah, I have a really good, I'll just comment on that. I have a really good friend who was in the Navy as well, and his expertise was in the technology around IED equipment. So because of that and what was happening in Afghanistan and Iraq, he ended up obviously working with a lot of other branches other than the Navy. He was embedded with the Marines. He worked with private contractors because of that particular expertise. It sounds like that expertise would have done more for you than just working in the Navy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And part of why I ended up choosing EOD is exactly what you mentioned. Like, that was the forefront in 2012 of what was going on. Everything in the news was IED centric. This is the front line. And additionally, this is an opportunity not only to fight for your company, for your country, but to go out and save somebody's life.
Yeah, and your own service member's life. I mean, they are dependent upon that kind of protection and help. And, you know, and we're speaking with those of you who are just joining us. We're speaking with Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, telling a story about why and how he joined the military and what he continued to do there. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to hit it back to you, Austin, as to why you joined and what motivated you and what you ended up doing.
Yeah. So becoming an EOD tech, explosive ordnance disposal, bomb squad is another kind of term you could use for it. So we were the guys who ended up being the bomb squad for all the other special operations units. Like, they would request the naval EOD teams to come out and help them accomplish their mission, whatever that was. And I went through that first 2 years of training and watched a lot of guys, not make it through. Even guys that you really expected to succeed, just for whatever reason, whether it was family, physical, mental, you couldn't always see inside the guy's head when he said, this isn't for me anymore.
And you mean didn't make it through that particular training?
Correct. Okay. I think out of our initial group of 24 guys, I think about 5 of us actually made it all the way through from boot camp to graduating as an EOD tech. So it's rated as more or less the second most difficult physically behind the SEAL program, and the second most difficult behind the nuclear engineering program for academics, because it really combines both of those.
Well, and you say physically, but I imagine mentally hugely difficult. Yeah.
So that was another thing that attracted me to it. And knowing that I would end up with other individuals who wanted to make an impact, who were playing at the highest that they could possibly play at, and some of the best in our country, that was a huge part of the reason that I joined EOD.
Well, and that's amazing that you tell the story, because I think a lot of times people think U.S. Navy, they either think, one, you're serving on a ship, floating around the sea, traveling around around the world. A lot of people outside of war zones or, wartime join the Navy because they want to see the world. And it's interesting that, you joining the Navy had something to do with not something where you're going to be sitting on a ship all the time. So they usually think about that, or they think Navy SEALs.
I will say I got to experience the ship for about 8 months out of 7 years, and
That's fun,
I could have done with less time on the ship would not have been a bad thing. I did form some incredible relationships during that deployment with folks who I still talk to, and I'm thankful for that experience. And honestly, something striking from that experience was, that was 2014 into 2015. And I was sitting on the side of the carrier at night saying, thank you, God, that I'm not being shot at right now. Mm. And I know because there were a lot of guys that were. And on one hand, it was very frustrating not to be able to put my skills to use because of politics. But also thankful just for my own security.
And I definitely want to come back to that. We are coming up on a break here in a minute, but I don't want to leave that just where you just left it, because I think it's important not only to your story, but also to what's currently going on in the world. And and in addition to that, if people are listening, it's like, we're talking with Austin. He is a U.S. Navy veteran, and he's served between 2012 to 2019. And when we come back, what I would love to do is talk a little bit more about that, but also you've got some really awesome things on the horizon of what you're doing as far as starting a new business and being supported by organizations that are helping you with that and helping veterans with that. We'll be right back. This is Amanda with The Veterans Voice, sponsored by Veterans Law Group on KABC 790. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with The Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and attorney with the Veterans Law Group, and we have exclusively represented veterans pursuing their VA disability claims for over 25 years. We are live this evening. I know we're doing an interview with Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran. If you have any questions about your VA claim or just in general would like to talk about things related to veterans, I know Austin's going to have a great ability to respond to that. Our number here is 800-222-5222 if you'd like to join us as part of the conversation, or if you just have a very specific question. Welcome back, Austin.
Hey, Amanda.
Hey.
Thank you for having me this evening as well. I don't think I said that earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been awesome so far. I just want to go back to what you were saying before we went to the break. Again, in talking about this show, our show is really about highlighting and celebrating veterans and just telling their stories. In a lot of cases is what this has turned into. And you made a comment about being on a ship and being very grateful that a particular moment that you remember that you were on a ship and being very grateful that you weren't being shot at. And I was just wondering, was this something in general, or was this what was going on in the world at that time and you were on a ship?
So this moment coincides fairly shortly after we started bombing ISIS intensely in 2014. And I don't know how much presence we had on the ground at that point, but I knew there was this massive conflict brewing from, frankly, a very, very complicated political situation that is so far beyond the understanding of most, and has it varies every couple of years, even because you have new groups come in with new ideals.
Sure.
Honestly, similar to the new groups that come in every couple of years in the U.S. So it can get complicated fast.
And I would imagine even what's currently going on over there right now, it's new groups and new ideals and some of the old stuff, but it's a complicated situation. It's not something that somebody can necessarily put a stake in the ground and say they've got it all figured out. Is that fair?
Exactly. I mean, just looking at who the individuals are, because specifically Afghanistan, we entered that country and changed the landscape in a matter of weeks, if not months. And it evolved over the next 20 years. And now there's this massive gap, both there and other places in the world. I don't want to exclude the other places that are going through similar conflicts.
Sure.
And
And I want to come back to what's going on right now, but can we start with what was happening in 2014 when you were talking about this new surge that was going in, bombings were happening. What was as much as you can tell us, what was your role at that point?
Yeah, I mean, part of our job was to know what threats were on the ground at that point. And ISIS was bringing a lot of things that, hadn't necessarily been used in unconventional warfare. And it was our job to know what those threats were. And, I mean, they progressed pretty steadily throughout their development as an organization as far as the threats that we were encountering on the ground.
Ever evolving new things.
Yeah, there was some scary stuff. I'll say going through our training, the section that I never really enjoyed was chemical warfare, because that stuff's nasty. It really is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, it's to put my attorney hat on for a minute, it's scary enough that I've had a recent case that got granted by the VA for PTSD related to a chemical attack that didn't really happen, but he thought it was happening. It was this really weird situation in the Gulf where it turned out ultimately, and I don't know if the military talks about this or if it's in the file somewhere, but I'm not going to speak about anything that I'm not allowed to, but it was a French, what do they call it? Not experiment, but it was an exercise. And they came in, and the people that my client and the people around them thought it was a real attack. And they ended up, putting their masks on and thinking that they were having this chemical attack. And one person was just having an anxiety attack and was kind of like losing it. And those kind of things are real. It seems like a crazy story to hear about it outside of it, but at the time he thought he was about to die because of this chemical attack. It's that scary.
I mean, this is going to be hard to convey, I think, but for the veterans who have, donned PPE with the gas mask and the suit and been through the drills and run circles around the building, that can be traumatic enough by itself. So imagining that, there's this element outside of that mask that will kill you if you breathe it.
Right.
And thinking that that's happening, I can't imagine.
Well, and there's no way in that moment to defend yourself. It's one thing of like, and I don't want to minimize this, it's one thing of being shot at and you have a gun, you can respond. This is something you can't see, you can't feel, you don't know what's happening until you're actually ingesting it. So I'm just acknowledging that there was a lot of that was going on since Desert Storm, of fear of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go on a little bit into kind of what you're doing now and that kind of thing, it was, those were moments that were really spent kind of, you were in the military from 2012 to 2019, so 7 years. You re-upped evidently, or you didn't sign a contract for 7 years, right?
Yeah, my initial contract was for 6 years, and I had the opportunity to go on another deployment at the end of that 6 years. So I signed to my rotation date, and I was able to go on another deployment before that rotation date came about. So that was a huge part of it, was being able to go on another deployment.
It was important to you to go on another deployment. Is that what you're saying?
Right. And I got the opportunity to learn a lot about leadership on my second deployment. And I'm thankful for that. Like, it was a very different experience as the new guy on the boat with this team who had worked up together, because I actually joined them when they had already deployed. And my second team, I got to do the entire workup cycle with, or my second deployment. And, yeah.
Well, and we're speaking with Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran, and we're going to talk a little bit about more about his career, and then move on to what he was just talking, or what he's doing now in his career. That new thing, I'm interested in the leadership. I've spent many years, many years studying leadership. Even before I was in a leadership position, it was something that was always really. I knew that was something that I was very drawn to, and I felt like it was, God's message to me, I guess, is that this is going to be your role, and it certainly is at this point in time in my life. And so I'm grateful for the people in my life who taught me leadership. It's one of those things you never really entirely finish learning.
Absolutely not. If you're in a leadership position and you're not learning something new every day, you're probably not being a very good leader.
Right. Tell me some of the things that you learned when you were I love that you just said that you learned some things in that second deployment. Tell me some of the things you've learned.
I think one of the harshest lessons was, it's not all about the skills and passing those on and making sure people are doing what they need to do correctly. There's so much more that goes into supporting your team, and it's impossible to lead and not fail. You're going to fail. That's going to be a part of it. And you're going to want to take that failure and learn from it. Otherwise, it just sits and eats at you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to apologize to the audience that I just heard my dog barking. We are a service dog friendly business here, so I have my dog here. Yeah, it's definitely not something that you ever finish learning. And I always felt like, and I heard this from somebody who was teaching me leadership a long time ago, Andy Stanley. He said, if you're sitting in a room and you're listening to somebody talking and you think you can't learn anything from them, you've learned everything you can. You're the problem in the room.
Yeah, I can see how that would be the problem.
Definitely.
But I've before the Navy, I hadn't had too many experiences where I got even the opportunity to lead. And then I got a solid opportunity to be a team leader on that second deployment. And I grew a tremendous amount from that. And I was able to carry that forward.
Was that something at all that, like I had mentioned, where it was something that was like in me that I kind of knew was in me? Is that something that you had ever thought that you would do, is be a leader?
Yes, I think so. Like some of those early experiences were just, me naturally being the leader of, my little group of friends. And I don't think it was ever the strong desire of like, okay, I want to go out and, lead a nation or anything.
You weren't
level.
expecting to be president of the United States, but
right. But I knew I had so much talent and ability, and honestly, I'd just been blessed in my life that I knew I needed to give back.
Awesome. Well, we're about to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what Austin is currently doing in his life. Maybe get into a little bit of current affairs if you're willing to. I try not to get political here, but sometimes we need to at least address what's going on in the world. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. We're speaking with Austin, a U.S. Navy veteran. Good evening, everyone. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group. Thank you for joining us. We've been talking this evening with Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran. One of the things I love to do with this show is to kind of give a little bit of a spotlight or tell the stories of the veterans that are in our lives, of why they joined and what the career was like, and then what they've been doing since then. And we have a lot going on in the world, and I will hopefully get to that portion of it. But Austin, welcome back. I would love to talk to you about your kind of exit out of the military, your transition period, and kind of what you're doing right now. So welcome back.
I'm glad you brought up the transition period because I got a story for that
We're
one.
going to talk. That's what I really want to talk about. So you got out in 2019, almost 2 years ago, September, right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
So
So talk to me
I
about
had,
one, the decision of getting out. Was it your contract was up or was there something else going on? That's a shorter answer, I
yeah,
think.
the extension that I had to go on my second deployment was wrapping up. I think it was about 3 or 4 months after I got back, and part of that ended up being terminal leave, which if you guys need to save it up, it's so worth it.
Well, explain what that is again. Not everybody listening is veterans.
That's fair. So terminal leave is where you kind of keep getting paid, but then you go on vacation, never to come back. It's a great time. I think it should be recommended highly.
You have built up vacation time that you can take, so you get basically a sabbatical before you're out.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So I had already met Heather, who's now my wife at this point, and we decided, after I get out of the military, let's go travel the nation. We don't know where we're going to live. It's not going to be in California. Sorry, Amanda.
You were stationed in Southern California for a good period of time of your career.
Yeah,
correct?
I was in San Diego for on Coronado for 5 years.
Which is where I live, so you're welcome.
I loved it. I just needed to go find some mountains.
Sure.
So we ended up in Morganton, North Carolina, after 2 years of traveling in our Airstream. And we had some incredible times, built our business. Heather has her own business, and we were able to build that from a kind of self-employed status to a team of 27 at the end of our travels. And that, going back to the leadership point, just taught me so much. And one of the things I was the most thankful for was the opportunity to really bring somebody up, mentor them, and then find that they're even better at doing what I was doing than I am. And that was an incredible experience.
I learned from one of my favorite leaders in the world, Andy Stanley. He says that you're not the leader because you're the best at it. You're the leader because you, one, know how to surround yourself with people that are good for you. But first is because you got there first. So you're first, and then you surround yourself with great people, and then people think you're a great leader. In reality, it's like you're a great leader because you have people, or you have a great business because you've surrounded yourself with people who probably know better at what you do than you do.
Exactly. So building that business was an incredible experience. We've since started a few more. And our second one is starting to take off. We're super happy about that. And my background, actually, before the Navy was I went to school for entrepreneurship. And so I knew that was ultimately the direction I wanted to go. Did I have any idea what that?
You did have an instinct about leadership. You did.
Okay, I'll give you that one. Did I have any idea what that really looked like in the end? No.
Sure.
But I knew I wanted to accomplish something, and entrepreneurship seemed like a good way to do that. So,
and one of the great things about military is it builds that structure, that leadership, that team type environment that taking into the civilian world. We've talked about this on this show before, and sorry to interrupt, but we've talked about this on the show where it's the transition from military life to civilian can be sometimes very hard because the civilian life doesn't really understand maybe your job title or that kind of thing. But if you really look at the values that are instilled upon people who serve in the military, me as an employer with most of my law firm here being military or past military or spouses military, you understand their values. I can teach you skills, but you understand the value of commitment and teamwork and work ethic and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think that was the biggest thing I was actually able to bring to our company was the systems and process that I had learned in the military. Just the ability to communicate, it is instilled in the culture from day one in the military. This is how you communicate. This is the language you use. This is how you type your papers. Every little detail has been mapped out over hundreds of years. And that is so valuable to then take that into the public sector and do incredible things and honestly guide people, not necessarily in their skills, but how to apply their skills.
Yeah, definitely. And we're speaking here. This is Amanda with the Veterans Voice, and we're speaking with Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran and currently working on some new exciting projects. And tell me about the program that you're in. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I've heard some good things.
Absolutely. I was super fortunate. In the past few months, I've started a new project working on some software development stuff, and I was accepted into Bunker Labs Veterans in Residence program. And, Blake Hogan is an incredible dude. He has a great book. If you want to go find him out there, he's the CEO of Bunker Labs.
Okay,
But
say his name again and the name of his book if you know, because it kind of muted a little bit.
Blake Hogan.
Hogan.
And I believe it's Third Shift Entrepreneur.
All right, there
I
you
wish
go.
I had it in front of me. And, I got accepted into the Charlotte cohort for this 6-month program. And Bunker Labs is really an opportunity to, one, network with other veterans, but also gain access to a ton of resources and knowledge of people who have gone through that same transition, experienced the struggles. I know I've been through them. I hit that 2-year wall. It was probably more like 18 months, but that is a rough time.
Tell me, expand on that a little bit. Tell me what you want, because I want to dig into a little bit more of what I do, but in relation to what you're talking about. But what do you mean by that 18-month, 2-year wall?
Yeah, I think you're excited to get out for many people to say, hey, I have my freedom. For me, it was I'm going to go explore the U.S. As that was wrapping down and transitioning to the next phase of my life, saying, what am I going to do? What team am I a part of?
Because team becomes so important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a clear plan, it's earth-shattering. And I was super fortunate to have a great support network built around me and a pretty clear mission of, where my wife and I want to head with our lives and what difference we want to make. But it's still that longing for total acceptance into a culture from the time you wake up at 6 a.m. until you put your head down on the cot out in the field.
Right. And I want to pause for a second that you said that, because so many times we think about military as being about, mission and, fighting the terrorism and all of that kind of thing. And what it really becomes for so many people is family that maybe you didn't really have. And when you see things that are going on in the world right now of going out there and helping and rescuing people who were, and we'll get back to this. I don't want to go right into political stuff right now, but rescuing people who are translators, and all, those become your team members and your family and the thing that is a part of your life every single day. For you, of 7 years of your life, it's different than what we live in the civilian world.
I think you're right. It's all of those things. It's your family. It's your coworkers. Many times you'll spend even time off with your team members. And, it's something I've seen in the past year with, everything around us being shut down, was the only people we see are our team members. I mean, this isn't our business, but looking back at the military, the only people we saw were our team members.
Yeah.
So there's a balance to be found there of having other pursuits. People talk about it with retirement a lot of, have a hobby. Otherwise, you're not going to know what to do with yourself.
Yep.
And I think that's true with transitioning out of the military too, is it's good to have other networks around you.
Definitely.
We intentionally pursued...
Sorry, we're coming up on a break here, so I don't want to cut you off because I think that what you're saying is really important, and I want to revisit that when we come back after the break. This is Amanda with the Veterans Voice, sponsored by the Veterans Law Group, and we're speaking with Austin, a U.S. Navy veteran. We'll be right back. Good evening. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice. I am a veteran advocate and attorney at the Veterans Law Group, and we like to do this show just to kind of highlight, veterans and their stories, tell their stories. We're typically not booking people who are promoting things or, having a book or whatever, just telling stories. And many of them should probably have books because their stories are so amazing. And this evening we are joined by Austin, who is a U.S. Navy veteran. And we've been talking a little bit about not only his military career, but his transition out of the military into the civilian world. Loved what we were talking about recently about leadership and the kind of leadership skills that you learned while you were there. Welcome back, Austin.
Hey, glad to be here.
We're grateful to have you. One of the things before we kind of move on to, I would be amiss to not ask you about what's going on in the world right now as a veteran who served during the time of the 20-year Afghanistan war. But I do want to go back a little bit to just what you were saying before we left about, having that team environment that you had while you were in the military and, more family and that kind of thing. Can you kind of revisit that for a second as we came back from commercial?
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of one of the unique things about Navy EOD is we're one of the smallest teams out there. A lot of our individual teams are 8 people, and you end up spending 2-3 years with those same 8 people, sometimes 7 days a week. I know when I was on the carrier, I spent so much time with those guys. Yeah. So
it's an incredibly unique world that not only people EOD or Navy SEALs or that kind of thing, but just people in the military that live in, that I think a lot of us as civilians don't really understand how important it is to you, or becomes to you, because that's your life. It's almost like you transition out of the military and you lose your family. And I know that a lot of you guys end up, staying in contact and that kind of thing, but sometimes you don't.
Well, if you took every part of your life, use the same people for each part, that's the best way I can compare it. And then trying to remove yourself from that, where all of your exposure is to this one group of people, in many times incredibly stressful, no matter what MOS or job you have, it's a stressful environment because it comes down to you're in a situation that could end in life and death.
Yeah.
And that isn't just when you're overseas. That mentality holds through training because you need to be exposed to that in order to be ready for overseas. So the 6 months or a year that you end up serving in Afghanistan, or for some guys, 5 years, the other 15 years that guy was in was the exact same environment.
Right.
And just as stressful.
Wow, that's...
And that, you see that coming through, so many guys having issues. So many, gals having issues too. Yeah.
Well, and I've seen...
tough to watch.
And I want to touch on this, and I'm going to... I use first names for a reason when I'm interviewing veterans, and I never want to make you feel uncomfortable about talking something if you're uncomfortable about it. But the world right now is a little bit on fire in the military community. I've been experiencing that. I'm sure you probably have with people that you know, or maybe even personally, of what's going on in the world. And, I know that the veteran suicide hotline has skyrocketed. There's been a lot of stuff of just like, why did we do this? What's going on? And we're leaving people behind, and just so much stuff that I've heard. And I don't even, I'm not a veteran myself. I will tell people that straight out. I work with them every single day, and it's been what I call a weird world right now. And I'm going to, kind of give you the floor a little bit of anything you want to say in this environment. And if you don't, then I've got a couple other questions for you.
I think the easiest thing to do is share from where I'm at. And then I have one other person's story that I feel like I can share, who I've talked to. I wasn't there. I wasn't directly involved. I sat there reading what was going on for years, but I couldn't watch the news for 3 seconds in those first couple of days. And I've tried to make sure I'm aware of where things have moved, and it's still very frustrating. I think I can make it about 3 minutes now. But I have somebody who I'm close with who is affected by PTSD, and he was a Marine, and I'm thankful he was already getting help from the VA, because he struggled a tremendous amount, and that's tough to watch. I will say, one, if you need help, ask. You know who you can talk to. You know the guys that you served with. You know the girls that you served with. Go to them. They will understand.
Yeah.
Secondly, if you're one of those folks who is doing all right, call every single one of those people that you know,
yeah,
and make sure they are doing all right too.
Yep.
It's.
I love that, because people who are struggling like that need people to reach out to them. They're not always. They have a hard time reaching out. So I love that you said that.
And it's not a hard process to dial somebody's number.
Yep.
Sometimes we just don't think of it. Sometimes it's like, do I really need to do this? Just do it. Mm-hmm. What's the worst that's going to happen? You get to go to somebody's birthday party. I mean, make the call.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the VA says so often of, make the call, but who they're talking to is the person who's struggling. And I think in general, if we send that message to make the call of people who are struggling, or even think might be struggling, or just, reaching out, that's certainly something we can all do. One more question before we go, and I know this is like a heavy part of the thing, is that we do VA disability. We're going to make sure that the veterans are taken care of through the VA. That's what we do here at the Veterans Law Group. I'm putting you on the spot, Austin. What are you doing right now?
So I'm actually developing. I've been passionate about freedom since I was 19 years old. And that was part of my inspiration for joining the military, and knowing that I wanted to provide everything I could as an individual to make sure the world is as free as it can be. So I'm actually working on a software development project called Stack Good, which is what I got accepted into Bunker Labs for. And, we're starting off with a need that we had in our own business of just, an all-in-one business software. But I want to develop that into a platform that allows a little bit more freedom online, whether that's personal freedom, freedom of speech, or financial freedom of building something, creating value, and giving back to others.
And how much do you feel? Sorry, how much do you feel like your time in the military? We're coming up close to time, but how much time do you feel like your time in the military, what skills you learned, the leadership like we talked about before, is contributing to what you're doing right now of launching this new business?
I think the confidence that if you have the right team around you, that you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. Maybe you can't solve every problem in the world. You probably can't.
Right.
But if you took all of us who are veterans or know a veteran you can probably solve every problem in the world.
Yes.
So that's my little challenge.
I would probably say that the veterans that I've known in my life, the problem-solving skills are some of the most amazing skills that veterans have, that I think in general us as civilians are not really taught. Like, are we really taught problem-solving skills? But people in the military are taught that. They're taught to come together. Do you remember that word synergy? We used to talk about synergy a lot.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that word in a lot of ways, but that's what I always think about when it comes to the team, like you're talking about, and then solving a problem. And entrepreneurship is really solving a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One more question before we go. Have you filed your disability claim yet?
No, I haven't.
I'm just giving you a hard time. So we at Veterans Law Group, that's what we do for a living, is that we help veterans with their VA disability claims. And we work only in appeals. So we're working in cases which are really the harder cases, the ones where the VA is ignoring, underrating, that kind of thing. One of the many things we've talked about is that veterans tend to a couple of reasons why they haven't filed their claim yet. One is usually, well, I haven't gotten around to it. The other is, well, other people need it more than me. I'm putting you on the spot, Austin. Which is your excuse? Or reason? I'm sorry, reason.
Is it going to make me more money to run the business or file this claim?
Oh, that's a new answer. And we've got just a few minutes left.
That's the sharpened answer.
We've just got like 30, 45 seconds left. And it's one thing, it's like, the only thing I'll tell you, Austin, if it's something that will affect your life long term, let us help you out.
Absolutely.
It's not about the money. It doesn't have to be about the money. It has to be about taking care of your beautiful wife and us as civilians fulfilling our contract to you. This is Amanda Manier with the Veterans Voice, sponsored by Veterans Law Group on KABC 790. Thank you for joining us this evening.